people will buy now. And that must.
They're not going up because of inflation, which is then causing their money to depreciate, and therefore they have to go and put their money somewhere else, like assets.
Let's take it back to the beginning. Take it back to the beginning to understand this. You have three things that create wealth: land, labour, and capital. When the land is enclosed and the earnings of land create a price, we must get a real estate cycle. That, by definition,
that is the privatisation of land.
Privatisation of the economic
we
land.
can own land. That's what we all, in our Western developed countries.
Well, you can collect the rent from it. Yes, there's nothing wrong with. Everybody has to own land. I'm not against ownership of land. It's important. It means that somebody will care for the land. But if you're permitted to then buy and sell land as a commodity with a price, then we must get a real estate cycle. And then, because we do get a real estate cycle, it means when the banks come in and create their credit based on the value of land, so you'll be given a mortgage in order to be able to buy your land and house. That means the banks start creating credit. The credit is created out of thin air, as I'm sure you know. Then that permits some violence to come into the cycle. When we get the violence to come into the cycle,
volatility
the volatility, yes.
Yeah.
The governments start to find that people don't like it when markets decline. So then we had, when in the 1920s and 30s, in the 1930s particularly, after so much speculation in the 1920s, and then the collapse into the Depression, we had a very young economist come along called John Maynard Keynes, and Maynard Keynes said that if, in the absence of government, in the absence of private spending, governments can come along and spend money, governments can come along and print money or buy bonds from the banks, and banks print the money on the government's behalf, government has the ability to smooth out the cycle. So from the after the Second World War, from the 1950s and 60s, governments did that, and they found, lo and behold, they thought they'd solved the business cycle. They thought they'd solved the economic cycle, until we got to 1974. Raging inflation, double-digit unemployment, and nobody could explain what was happening. And suddenly, Milton Friedman came along and said, well, it's happening because of monetary economics. Stop printing so much money. So then we got to the 1980s, and people thought Milton Friedman was right. So the US government, in order to stop printing so much money, in order to stop the inflation, they lifted interest rates to 15%. So we had a recession, but that was mid-cycle, yes? And then from 1982, they peaked in Australia at 15.5%. I bought my first house with a mortgage rate of 14.5%. Can you believe that? And in the United States, but it didn't matter because inflation was running at 17%. So house prices were still going up more than your home loan. Since that time, interest rates in their normal 30-year cycle that Kondratiev described, since that time, 1982, interest rates have roughly been coming down. And so when interest rates have been coming down a bit like that, well, that'll get built into land price. And what nobody understands is that at the end of the day, the iron law of economics that absolutely nobody understands, land price must take all the economic gains. And since the 1990s, we've had prodigious gains in tech and everything else. Those gains must eventually go into land price, which means banks will create credit against it, which means more expensive houses. And that's your cycle, right? And I'm the only person in the world that's put out a book that has identified real estate cycles, never been shorter than 17 years, never longer than 21, but they average out at 18.5. And real estate cycles, the land price, they have gone up for 14 years, regardless of whether governments were in debt or not, regardless of whether there was inflation or not, regardless of whatever the economy was doing, regardless of government behaviour, private behaviour, bank behaviour, your behaviour, mine behaviour, the cycle's been 14 years up, and it's been as regular as 14 years up, 4 down since 1800. Since 1800, for heaven's sake. In 1800, we didn't even have a light bulb. So
that's true.
People want to talk about what's going on now. I think you've just got to have a little bit of a bigger perspective read my book, and you'll get to see. Once you do read my book, and I've had email after email from people. Jason, you've seen what people have to say about my service. I put up everything that I get. And I get an email every day from people that say to me, Phil, thank heavens you wrote your book, because now it has taken away all my stress. Now I see the bigger picture. I see what has to happen within the cycle, and I can plan my investments. I can plan what I'm doing. And the biggest comment I get is Phil, I wish I'd read your book. I wish I knew now. I wish I knew then what I know now. I get people saying, I made all the mistakes. I've done all that. Now I can see it. I can see the cycle. I just wish I'd read it when I was 25, right? So that's the bigger picture, right? Now we get to crypto. And now we get to all the stuff that's happening there. And I'm a supporter, right? I'm a big, all the what's going on with all these currencies and the digital stuff and the inventions. They're absolutely fabulous. They really are. And the blockchain and everything else. But here's the big but. There are two things, Jason, about that you've got to follow. In a society that allows banks to create credit based on land value, then when somebody has crypto and their currency and all their Bitcoin and everything else, what they're going to say eventually is, if they've made large gains on Bitcoin, they're going to go to the bank and they're going to say to the bank, I want to buy a house and I want to buy some land. I've got all these Bitcoin, I've got these gains, I've got everything else. And they're going to ask the bank, can I buy the real estate, but at the same time, hold on to my Bitcoin and hold on to my assets? And the bank will turn around and say, well, let me think about this, because the bank is there for the shareholders. The bank makes money by creating credit. And then those gains, the earnings eventually as a profit, are then distributed to shareholders. The bank's responsibility is not to you and to me. The bank's responsibility is to shareholders. And so the bank will say, yes, we will use your Bitcoin as security for the mortgage. So you have to pledge that Bitcoin to the bank. The bank now owns the Bitcoin you've got. You've pledged the security, but you've now got a very nice house. What happens if, in the normal scheme of things, Bitcoin can't keep going up? It will have its retracements. It's now down by half. And you pledged your Bitcoin to buy your house at $60,000. And the Bitcoin's now worth $30,000. What do you think might happen? There comes at some point when the banks might call in the loan and say, we want your Bitcoin now, because you pledged the loan at 2 million. Your Bitcoin's only now worth 1 million, and you said it was 2, and the value of the house is at 2 million. You've now got to give us the Bitcoin. That helps create the cycle, because at the end of the day, all the Bitcoin gains, everything that everybody makes, the crypto, the currency gains, eventually it will find its way into real estate, which on the Gold Coast, it's been doing, right? So as it finds its way into Gold Coast real estate and everything else, it keeps pushing the prices up. But there will come a time when that ceases. History shows it ceases after 14 years up of land value increases in the United States. We're not there yet. 22 is we're not there yet. We've got a few more years to go, but there'll be a bit of pain in the stock market at the moment. Does that make sense?
100%. I hope it makes sense for everyone else watching. And if they want a more deeper understanding, obviously the book. I know we've been talking about the book. We've been talking about the live event.
Or what else they could do is watch that live event we did. I thank you sincerely, Jason, for giving me the chance to speak about that live event. I know you got from your people some amazing feedback, right? I know people got a lot out of it with what I had to say, right? And those people who, if you're listening to this and they were at my event, they'll understand what I'm saying now. It gives them provides a bigger picture, yes. The other thing people can do, I produce what we call a boom bust bulletin. And that's it's $47 a year, right? It's the price of a cup of coffee for a week. Cheapest chips. Yeah. You can log on to my site and you can get onto that report. And the first thing you should do, once you pay your $47, go and have a look at issue number 1, which was a couple of years back. But that summarises the cycle for you. And if you find that useful, then you can just go and get my book. Book's not a heavy read. It's all about history and stuff. It's not.
And we talk about it a lot, but it is really just that book 70 Aussie bucks, whatever it is, 70 Aussie, 80. And if you want it in audio visual, to talk about the cycle and understand these gains, obviously the live event. We'll have that down in the link the coming days, probably out by the time everyone else has watched this.
Yeah, it was good.
For me, just a couple $100, the cheapest education
Absolutely
I ever had. I've spent $30,000 to $40,000 just on trading courses.
Yeah.
They were fantastic because it was about GAN and I got one-on-one time. But in terms of, value to what I'm getting out of it, for the $200, I'll 10,000x that easy.
Yeah.
100,000. It's so cheap from the property that I'm buying, the understanding the cycle, not being scared at different times. It's a couple $100. It was the cheapest. I know people are going to be like, stop shilling your crap. That's fine. It's down there. We'll keep talking about the cycle, but really, I think that's kind of answered a lot of the questions for now. But I'll aim to get you back on again. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think. Well, one thing you can do is watch crowd psychology. Have a look at what people are doing in a crowd, and when everybody's fearful, that usually is a low coming in roughly, and when everybody feels really good, that's when usually the top's coming in. If you can get to learn that as well, a bit of psychology, that's also very helpful. I'm not saying that's easy, but you know what I mean, right? It's
I cover it all the time. I put out some videos today. All I did was talk about psychology of the market. I remember the top in Bitcoin, April 2021, extreme greed. We dipped. We came back up in May, lower top. The greed was more extreme then than it was for the top. And, it just had to fall over from that point. It's hard at the time, but it fell over.
Yes, it is hard at the time. That's right. Once you learn it, it becomes easier, yes.
Yeah. So we're looking now, just as a summary, May is where we are now. I think people should definitely come back and rewatch these things so that you can see in the future, whether we were right or wrong. If you want to get caught up in terms of recession or bear market, be our guests. At the same time, it doesn't matter because this is what's part of the cycle, and we're looking forward for I guess, crypto tech to obviously take off as well. But real estate is the mainstay.
It's the land price that matters, which is real estate. I also, Bitcoin and things worth watching because they'll probably lead the market. And they topped first, I think, was it November last year?
Early November, yeah.
Yeah, so they'll probably bottom first as well. And see how we go from there. Worth good. The other thing I did want to say was, if it is I'm going to write about this as soon as I can once I've studied some more GAN stuff. But if the economic rent of land was collected as a citizen's dividend, and I do a citizen's dividend ebook, which people can find on my site.
It's free. It's free. I've got it. I'll put it in the description. I'll put it in all the description of our interviews.
Do. If a citizen's dividend became operable in the economy, the perfect way to run the economy would be with digital coins. Absolutely perfect. They are long overdue. It's the time is right. They're fabulous things, and if we did that with running digital coins and the digital exchanges and various things, and people could exchange stuff using the digital coins properly, you wouldn't actually need government. You could completely eradicate government with the use of a citizen's dividend and blockchain and digital currencies.
I think we're heading towards that now with DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations.
Yes, but the problem we've got at the moment is unless the governments can control those things, the present governments we've got, none of that will ever happen because the governments will, at the end of the day, need to control it, especially in the Chinese areas. They'll need to know what their citizens are doing. They'll want to know what their citizens are doing and want to know that they're not plotting to overthrow the government. So whilst we've got government in its present format, those things will never be permitted to operate at their full potential because the government will have to eventually control it, and it won't change anything in the long run because if the rent of land is not collected as a citizen's dividend, and the government still issues the government begins to issue its digital coins and digital currency, it won't change anything because we're still going to get the enclosed land value. We'll still get a real estate cycle, and if anything, it will just make things absolutely more volatile. Okay, you have to understand what economic rent is to fully grasp everything that's going on today. It's an eye-opener once you see it. Citizens Dividend is ebook is a good place to start.
It's free too, so I'll leave it there. It's a good place to start. I'm going to get you back on the channel again, as much as you enjoy repeating yourself every few months.
I'll see how we go.
But there's going to be other stuff that comes up this year.
Yeah,
like you said, we might have a couple of months we go churn sideways, 1 to 2 months. Then we'll have another dip. There'll be some other things that come out. Maybe the interest rates go up again, maybe something else. But I'm sure there'll be a lot more questions. I'll get you back on. So thanks again for your time. And if you want to stay in touch with Phil.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, mate. If you want to stay in touch with Phil in the meantime, links are in the description. He's got Twitter and obviously Property Sharemarket Economics. Thanks once again, mate. Cheers, everyone. See you soon.